Hello and a warm welcome into the show. Coming up for you this week, a report from the Foundation for Young Australians saying that automation will disrupt every single job. That's quite a bold claim, is it not, by 2030. Plus, tips on how to professionally and correctly ask for a pay rise. Also on the show today, a look at the career of Andrew Willits, the market trader turned entrepreneur. First off, though, topical, this defining an organisation's purpose matters, but you only really realise it when things run amok, it would seem. Long-term commercial and personal success, these are themes that we're reminded of, but do we avail themselves of them at the right time? Well, Nicholas Barnett, a man who's been a director, business founder and consultant for over 35 years, would argue that purpose is overlooked often, despite the many advantages that it can bring to the workplace. He's joining us now from our Melbourne studios, and a warm welcome to you. I suppose identifying, Nicholas, welcome back to you, the kind of rubber hits the road on this, because we sail on, and then something will pull us up smart, even in a corporate context, a crisis and a backfiring of best practice via someone who's aggrieved and takes their case outside the workplace, and it ends up in a court, and so it goes and so it goes. What say you to all of these principles acting as some kind of a firewall on that same set occurrence?
Yeah, Carson, you've set the scene really well, I think, because there's been a massive change in how organisations need to deal with the world. With social media, with the internet, everything is seen everywhere all the time, and what you're doing, what your employees are doing, whether it's 1 out of 50,000 or 1 out of 10, it rapidly transfers right across the country, right across the globe. And you're responsible as an organisation. So the question really is, how do you ensure that you are seen by the community, your customers and your employees as well, of course, to be doing the right thing? And how do you make sure that you have a culture and purpose drives you? How do you make sure that the things that are driving you are the right things and acceptable to the community and the customers? So
yes, I mean the skeptics would say, as you know, Nicholas, well, that's fine and that's accessible. If you want to pull apart those specifics, you can go down the road of ethical investing, and you can ring fence and set up these statements and principles. But for the rest of us, there's this kind of reality check on all of the principles running into the imperative for shareholders, which can often clash and not fit in any shape or form. What would you say to that?
I'd say that over the last 5-10 years, organisations felt very comfortable saying our main purpose, our main aim is to maximise our shareholders' wealth, and really that's the end of it, and the community doesn't really matter. And if you take that to its extreme, actually, you're also saying not only do your employees not matter, in other words, you need to make more money, you sack employees. In fact, not only do you sack them, you give the boss a bonus for the more they sack and the more costs they cut out.
Yeah.
And not only that, you actually say customers are expendable. You can get rid of customers as well. So that's great for the short term, or it may be great. Wall Street might applaud all that, but we are seeing more and more of the community and government saying these big pays that are being paid, these actions that we're seeing in the banking sector are being belted a bit right now, and people out there are saying, well, we're not that happy with what's going on, and if customers are being belted, we're going to stop that. And there's been a bit of a backlash, and the government's jumped on and put on a banking levy.
Yes.
So there's these things that are happening in the community now, and boards are saying, well, gee, we want to rebuild that trust because we're losing the trust. How do we do that? And that's really the big question.
Are we having enough of those board members, though, Nicholas, going out on a limb and articulating this? Or is it being left to others to, play devil's advocate at some belated point, like we're even doing now? But why are we not getting these strident remarks made? Is it because, there's a sense that there's another career out there and I don't want to burn my bridges, and so I've just got to zip up and pretend that nothing's wrong, but I'll resign, I'll go, but the culture won't change.
Yeah, look, Carson, I think there are a lot of discussions going on around board tables. There's no doubt about it. As you've mentioned, I've just written this new book, Why Purpose Matters. We've actually got 9 case studies of organisations there that are really purpose-driven and values-led organisations. And I can't tell you how many people are saying we need to know, we need to understand more about this. We're starting to talk about it in our organisation, and it's coming to the fore. And purpose matters. What's going on in organisations is thousands of policies and procedure manuals and all of these things, but what are they tied to? What are they based on? What grounds them? And if you don't have purpose, you don't have a sufficient roots to ground what you do. And I think the other important thing around that is if you don't have purpose, you actually also don't have, and you're not able to provide the meaning and fulfilment to your employees that are going to unlock their passion, their energy and drive to drive your economic engine. So if you want employees that are going to be inspired and encouraged, particularly the millennial generation, you need something more than, hey, come here to make more money for the boss. That's not going to cut it anymore.
Is this something that needs to be incorporated into a company director's program that needs to then be almost like a sort of a Hippocratic oath that on leaving for the C-suite world, you are tasked with updating, inputting into, refreshing, depending on your designation inside the C-suite, but it's not sufficient just to sort of have it there as a sort of optional component. It would have to be seen as, you know, what I know it may sound like another administrative, to your point, it may sound like another administrative burden to bear, but you're saying this is imperative, not kind of just on the fringes.
Well, it's more than imperative. I mean, it's the rock and the foundation upon which an organisation's built. As I said, you can have all these thousands of other things, but unless you have great clarity around what are the values of this organisation, what do we aspire to be, and what's our purpose, unless that's really clear, it makes all the rest of the decision-making really hard. You're going to get random decisions, and you're going to get, no matter how clever and astute your people are, they're not going to be able to make all the perfect decisions because they won't have anything to line it up with.
Was there
Ken Blanchard was one of the great leaders.
Go on.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah.
Well, Ken Blanchard, who's one of the great leaders in my view, he wrote a little thing in the front of my first book, and he said, leadership, there's only two things you need to know about leadership. And he said, unless you have a clear direction, purpose, strategy and values, your leadership matters for nothing. It's irrelevant because there's no leadership there. There's management, but there's no leadership. And he went on to say, and the only second thing you need to know, unless people have something worthy, a worthy purpose to serve, a higher order purpose, they will become self-serving.
Right.
And I think that is the simplicity of that.
Nicholas, the notion of the companies that you've chosen to highlight in the book, is there any common theme that unites them insofar as their willingness to act on this? What brought that about in a, you know, on balance, when you draw all those examples together, was there a common theme? You can lead a horse to the water, but you can't make it drink notion. Was there a crisis common to each of those companies that arrested their attention, that saw them undertake root and branch change?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so look, I think one of the common denominators was actually the people themselves. They were truly authentic leaders who really believed that there was more to life than just making money. They had a deep desire to be purposeful themselves, and they had a deep desire for an authenticity that says, I really want to build an organisation that's different and special and unique. And I want to be able to provide meaning and fulfilment for my employees. And I think if I can do that with my leadership team and do that in an inclusive and engaging way, then we will build a substantially different organisation from the many Me Too organisations that are out there. So I think that was one of the big critical differences.
Right.
And part of that leadership and part of the purpose, and there's lots of examples there, thousands of hours are spent to work out your purpose. It's not as if you get your marketing team and you bring them in and say, what do we do?
Yeah.
You actually involve and engage your whole workforce and your leadership team around a really hard discussion, discovering, unearthing. As KPMG, my book was launched last night by Peter Nash, National Chairman of KPMG. They spent hundreds of thousands of hours to come up with 4 words to describe their purpose. And it's inspiring confidence and empowering change.
Right.
And everything they do is built on that solid rock, that solid foundation.
As far as continuity goes, you quote George Savvides, the former managing director and CEO at Medibank. Purpose has been more transformational than I could have possibly imagined when we initially set out to discover it. The notion there, of course, is of a company that's been subject to immense change, coming out of government control, subject to the rigour of the private sector, a cost-out program, of course, then to address, and still working at it and, in a sense, floundering on it. Only recently, Craig Drummond held up his hand and said, look, millennials aren't showing the interest that we believe they would in the product, how to engage, etc. I'm just wondering, amidst all of that distraction but necessary day-to-day, how you get continuity on the purpose that you've just articulated.
Yeah, so I can't talk a lot about Medibank today, but what I can say, and George has got the 3 or 4 pages in the book about his experience at Medibank, and it's a fantastic story because in the simplicity of it, George and his team and his employees decided, are we bill payers or are we players in the health debate? And do our customers want more efficient bill paying, or do they want something else? And they discovered they want better health. So better health, 2 words, determined over thousands of hours and a lot of hard work. Better health became the foundation upon which Medibank and George transformed that organisation from. He was there for 14 years. So in the early days, it was just paying bills and being an insurance company.
Right.
And was that really going to inspire employees to say, well, actually, let's pay them faster and better and quicker and whatever?
Yeah.
Or was there something bigger that was going to give them more significance and meaning? And they actually came up with better health, and I think it was just so inspirational. And that changed everything at Medibank. It changed everything over those 14 years.
I mean, you used the notion of whether it was just a throwaway, but you said over many thousands of hours to arrive at that. Now, some would say that is a luxury, Nick, that we'd love to have at our disposal, but it just ain't one that's afforded us. We've got KPIs. Speaking of KPMG, one knows in the accounting profession as much as law, there are KPIs and there are billable hours. Now, how do you monetize, or how do you prove that there's value early on in that quest when you're going to have to allocate that many thousands of hours to arrive at 2 words?
Yeah, I guess that gets back to the authenticity and why you're doing it. You want to provide the engagement and the stimulation and the meaning and fulfillment for your people. You want to do the right thing by your customers and the community, and it's a holistic approach, and it is the single best investment ever made by any of these people mentioned in the book or any other organisation, our organisation. It's by far the best investment, and I tell you, when I say you take thousands of hours, and yes, for an organisation like KPMG with 200,000 people around the world, getting them all on the same page and agreeing there's only 4 words that are going to guide all we do for the rest of time, or certainly for years and years to come, what a massive, brilliant investment versus saying, you guys all do your own thing, let's not get on the same page, just go to it. I mean, I know where I'd spend my money, and it's... And by the way, the process of engaging your people in something where you're saying you guys are all going to have an input and we're going to live this together and we're going to really drive it, I mean, that's a unifying and engaging and exciting process in itself, and that will help drive and hard bake the purpose and the values, assuming you're doing that at the same time, into the culture and DNA of your organisation. It'll transform your organisation if you do that.
Nicholas, Put it, though, into the realm of a listed company where you've got quarterly expectations. The example you give of KPMG and Medibank before it was taken public was, of course, the accountability metrics are a whole lot different, are they not? You know, when you have got, even to my point earlier, of a cost-out program, everything you've said to your workers about the value you place in them, and then the next breath, because of expectations of fund managers, that there is kind of a rubber hits the road reality. These people, in large measure, are being shown the door. So for all the talk of we value you and, you know, share our ethos, that's dispensed with, where they're given that box to pack up.
And that is one of the real dilemmas of being a listed company. And listed companies, a number of listed companies saying, look, we are taking a longer term view. We're not focusing on the quarterly earnings. Others are very beholden to the process, and they jump and change to try and meet the earnings and do all fancy things. I think authentic leadership requires a longer term and more holistic approach, and part of that also is considering beyond just the dollar and the immediate dollar, what's sustainable. We've talked a little bit about the banks and other sectors, and you say, they do have a social license to operate, and that social license comes from the community. And if the community says, well, I don't like that, and if the customers say, I'm not so sure about that, those earnings won't be there for long, will they?
Indeed.
So it's all about, what about long-term sustainability, and you need to take a bigger view of the world. And Wall Street, I wouldn't be too excited for trying to run to the beat of their drum.
Well,
very hard stuff.
Indeed, very hard, and this is the vexing conundrum. Nicholas, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Nicholas Barnett, and Why Purpose Matters, How It Can Transform Your Organisation, out now in all good bookshops. We're going to take a really short break. When we come back, that promised look at the career of Andrew Willits, the market trading whiz kid, really, turned entrepreneur. More in a minute.